Wu Zetian built a secret police network. Cleopatra seduced Rome's most powerful men. Elizabeth I weaponized her virginity. Indira Gandhi declared emergency rule. Margaret Thatcher broke unions with an iron fist. 5 women, 5 different strategies. One common goal: absolute power in a world designed to exclude them. History loves to call these women ruthless, ambitious, manipulative. But when men use the same tactics, they're called strategic, determined, visionary. The truth is, these 5 leaders didn't just break glass ceilings. They shattered them, burned the fragments, and rebuilt entire systems in their own image. And if you look closely at their playbooks, you'll see the same strategies being used by women in power today. Wu Zetian, The Art of Elimination. China, 655 AD, a young concubine named Wu watched as the empress struggled to maintain influence over the aging emperor Gaozong. Wu understood something fundamental. In a palace full of women competing for one man's attention, sentiment was weakness. Power required sacrifice. The tactic Wu mastered was systematic elimination, not random violence, but calculated removal of obstacles. When Empress Wang stood in her way, Wu allegedly suffocated her own infant daughter and blamed the empress. Historians still debate whether this actually happened, but the accusation alone was enough. Wang was deposed, tortured, and executed. But Wu didn't stop there. She created the cruel officials, a secret police force that reported directly to her. These agents infiltrated every level of government, turning the bureaucracy into an intelligence network. Officials who opposed her disappeared in the night. Families who whispered dissent found themselves accused of treason. Fear became Wu's most loyal servant. By 690 AD, Wu had done what no woman in 3,000 years of Chinese history had achieved. She declared herself emperor, not empress. She founded her own dynasty, the Zhou, replacing the Tang temporarily. She ruled for 15 years, promoting officials based on merit rather than birthright, expanding the empire, and supporting Buddhism. Modern parallel? Look at how some contemporary leaders consolidate power through intelligence agencies and selective prosecution of opponents. The tools have changed, but the strategy remains. Control information, eliminate rivals, inspire fear. Cleopatra, strategic seduction. Egypt, 48 BC. A 21-year-old woman faced impossible odds. Her brother husband Ptolemy XIII had expelled her from Alexandria. The Roman Republic was tearing itself apart in civil war. Egypt's independence hung by a thread. Cleopatra had no army, no treasury, no allies. What she did have was intelligence, charisma, and an understanding of male psychology that would reshape the Mediterranean world. Cleopatra's tactic was strategic alliance through personal relationships. When Julius Caesar arrived in Alexandria pursuing his rival Pompey, Cleopatra saw her opportunity. The famous story of her being smuggled into Caesar's quarters rolled in a carpet wasn't just romantic drama. It was a calculated political move. She needed to reach Caesar before her brother's advisors poisoned him against her. The relationship worked. Caesar restored her to the throne, gave her a son, and brought her to Rome as his partner. When Caesar was assassinated, Cleopatra pivoted immediately. She identified the next power center, Mark Antony, one of Rome's 3 rulers after Caesar's death. Her relationship with Antony was even more strategic. She presented herself as the living embodiment of the goddess Isis, merging Egyptian mysticism with Hellenistic culture. She bore him 3 children, creating a dynasty that could unite East and West. She funded his military campaigns, making herself indispensable. Critics called it seduction, but Cleopatra was playing a game of survival. She spoke 9 languages. She was the first Ptolemaic ruler in 300 years to learn Egyptian. She studied mathematics, philosophy, astronomy, and medicine. Her relationships with Caesar and Antony weren't about romance. They were about preserving Egyptian independence against the greatest military power the world had ever seen. She almost succeeded. If Octavian hadn't defeated Antony at Actium, Cleopatra might have created an alternative Roman Empire centered in Alexandria. When she finally lost, she chose suicide over humiliation, dying on her own terms. Today's parallel? Watch how modern female leaders build strategic partnerships and use cultural intelligence to navigate male-dominated international politics. Ursula von der Leyen's navigation of EU politics, building coalitions across ideological lines, shows similar tactical flexibility. Elizabeth I, the Virgin Queen strategy. England, 1558. A 25-year-old woman inherited a bankrupt kingdom torn apart by religious conflict. Her father had executed her mother. Her half-sister had imprisoned her in the Tower of London. Catholic Europe wanted her dead. Protestant extremists wanted her to marry immediately and produce an heir. Elizabeth's tactic was brilliant. She weaponized the one thing everyone expected her to do. Instead of marrying, she turned her unmarried status into a source of power. Every European monarch with an eligible son saw a chance to control England through marriage. Elizabeth encouraged them all. She flirted with French princes, Spanish archdukes, Swedish kings. She kept negotiations going for years, extracting diplomatic concessions and military alliances, while never committing. Meanwhile, she told her people she was married to England itself. "I have already joined myself in marriage to a husband, namely the Kingdom of England," she declared. She called herself the Virgin Queen, creating a cult of personality that merged political power with quasi-religious devotion. This strategy gave her something unprecedented: independence. Male monarchs had to balance power with their wives' families and in-laws. Elizabeth answered to no one. She chose her own advisors based on competence, not family connections. She could make decisions without consulting a husband or worrying about a consort's agenda. When Spain sent the Armada to invade England in 1588, Elizabeth personally rallied her troops at Tilbury, wearing armor and declaring, "I know I have the body of a weak, feeble woman, but I have the heart and stomach of a king, and of a king of England too." The Armada was destroyed, and Elizabeth's legend was sealed. She ruled for 45 years, transforming England from a minor kingdom into a major power, fostering the English Renaissance and establishing the foundations of the British Empire, all without ever marrying. The modern application? Some female leaders deliberately remain unmarried to political factions, maintaining independence by never fully committing to any single ideology or group. Angela Merkel mastered this in Germany, keeping all sides guessing, maintaining power for 16 years. Indira Gandhi, emergency powers. India, 1975. The Prime Minister faced the greatest crisis of her career. Courts had found her guilty of electoral fraud. Opposition parties demanded her resignation. Protests erupted across the country. Democracy itself seemed to be turning against her. Indira Gandhi's tactic was shocking. She declared a state of emergency, suspended civil liberties, and ruled by decree. For 21 months, India became an authoritarian state. Gandhi censored the press, arrested political opponents including members of parliament, postponed elections, and amended the constitution to increase her powers. Over 100,000 people were imprisoned without trial. Her son Sanjay ran forced sterilization programs that affected millions. It was the darkest period in independent India's history. But from Gandhi's perspective, it was necessary. She believed democracy had become dysfunctional, that India needed strong leadership to modernize. She pointed to economic growth, infrastructure development, and the elimination of corruption. When she finally called elections in 1977, convinced she would win, the Indian people delivered their verdict: crushing defeat. Gandhi lost her own seat in parliament. Democracy had survived. But here's the remarkable part. 3 years later, India voted her back into power. The opposition government had proven incompetent. People remembered that trains ran on time during the emergency, that inflation had been controlled. Gandhi returned as prime minister and ruled until her assassination in 1984. Her legacy remains controversial. She saved Bangladesh's independence, made India a nuclear power, and promoted women's rights. She also suspended democracy and authorized military action against Sikh separatists that led directly to her murder. The parallel today? Watch how leaders worldwide invoke emergency powers during crises, from pandemics to economic meltdowns to security threats. It's the language of temporary necessity often leads to permanent expansion of executive authority. The question Gandhi's story raises: can democracy survive those who believe they must destroy it to save it? Margaret Thatcher, The Iron Fist, Britain, 1979. A grocer's daughter became prime minister of a country in collapse. Inflation raged at 27%. Unions controlled major industries. The economy was hemorrhaging money. The Soviet Union called her the Iron Lady, meant as an insult. She embraced it. Thatcher's tactic was confrontation. No compromise, no consensus, no retreat. When coal miners struck in 1984, threatening to bring down her government as they had brought down her predecessor, Thatcher prepared for war. She stockpiled coal for a year before the strike began. She deployed police like an occupying army in mining communities. She refused all negotiations. The strike lasted a year. Miners' families starved. Communities were destroyed. Thatcher never blinked. She won. The unions were broken. Britain's industrial base was dismantled. Free market capitalism replaced the post-war consensus. She privatized everything she could, from telecommunications to water companies. She cut taxes for the wealthy, reduced government spending, and declared that there is no such thing as society. Her critics called her heartless. Unemployment doubled. Entire regions became economic wastelands. The gap between rich and poor widened dramatically. But her supporters saw a leader who saved Britain from socialist decline, who made tough choices that weak men couldn't make. She won 3 elections, dominated British politics for 11 years, and fundamentally reshaped not just Britain, but global economic thinking. Thatcherism became a worldwide phenomenon, influencing Reagan in America, Pinochet in Chile, and free market reformers across the developing world. The modern echo? Leaders like Giorgia Meloni in Italy embraced the strong woman image, refusing to soften their positions or compromise with opponents. The Iron Lady playbook: Project Strength, never apologize, crush opposition decisively. The pattern: 5 women, 5 strategies, but look at what they share. Each understood that the normal rules didn't apply to them. Male leaders could afford to be moderate, to build consensus, to show weakness occasionally. These women couldn't. They knew that one mistake, one moment of perceived weakness, and they would be destroyed. So Wu Zetian built a secret police state. Cleopatra used every relationship as a strategic tool. Elizabeth weaponized her unmarried status. Indira Gandhi suspended democracy. Thatcher broke the unions. Were these tactics more ruthless than what men employed? Absolutely not. Caesar crossed the Rubicon with an army. Henry VIII executed 2 wives. Stalin purged millions. Pinochet threw dissidents from helicopters. The difference is how we remember them. When a man seizes power, historians call it leadership. When a woman does it, they call it manipulation. When a man crushes opposition, it's decisiveness. When a woman does it, it's cruelty. These 5 women understood something profound. Power doesn't care about fairness. It cares about effectiveness. And in systems designed to exclude them, they couldn't afford to play fair. Today, female leaders still navigate this impossible balance. Be too soft, and you're dismissed as weak. Be too hard, and you're called a witch, a tyrant, unfeminine. Ursula von der Leyen faces this in Brussels, building consensus in the EU, while being criticized as both too accommodating and too rigid. Giorgia Meloni in Italy embraces right-wing nationalism while navigating expectations about how a woman should lead. The tactics these historical figures pioneered are still in play, building intelligence networks to control information, using personal relationships strategically to build alliances, maintaining independence by refusing to be captured by any faction, using emergency powers to bypass normal democratic processes, projecting uncompromising strength to intimidate opposition. The question isn't whether these tactics are moral. The question is whether they work, and history suggests they do. Wu Ziqin ruled for 15 years and is remembered as one of China's most effective emperors, despite being erased from official histories by male successors. Cleopatra kept Egypt independent for 2 decades longer than should have been possible. Elizabeth I turned England into a superpower. Indira Gandhi modernized India and returned to power even after suspending democracy. Thatcher reshaped global capitalism. They paid enormous personal costs. Wu Zetian died isolated, her Zhou dynasty immediately overthrown. Cleopatra killed herself rather than be paraded through Rome. Elizabeth died alone, without family, the Tudor line ending with her. Indira Gandhi was assassinated by her own bodyguards. Thatcher was betrayed by her own party, forced out in tears. But they changed history. They proved that women could wield power as effectively, as ruthlessly, as strategically as any man. They created playbooks that modern female leaders still study, adapt, and deploy. So the next time someone calls a woman in power manipulative, ruthless, or ambitious, ask yourself, would we use those words if she were a man? Or are we simply uncomfortable seeing power in female hands? These 5 women weren't asking for permission. They took what the world said they couldn't have, and the world will never forget their names.